This is Rhea, and this is Just the Who of Us, where we talk about a range of topics, including life events, current events, spirituality, entertainment, family relationships, as well as answering listener questions and more. Tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So, yes. So I'm Jess. I am a therapist by background and a non-monogamous relationship coach. So I have been a licensed social worker. Well, I've been a social worker since 2017. And then kind of through my own life stuff and figuring out who the heck I am, which, I think we do that. I've had several times in my life where I'm 18, 19, 20, and I'm like, I know who I am now. And then
100%.
a couple years go by and you're like, nah, that ain't it. And then you think you know again, right? And so for me, around 28 is when I kind of was reading more about polyamory and non-monogamy and was like, wait a second, could this be me? Oh shoot, now what do I do? Right. So, that's the shortened version. But yeah, so I really came to this work after figuring that out for myself, talking to my husband. We were married 4 years at the time, and just kind of sharing with him what I was thinking. He handled it as well as one could possibly expect, thankfully.
Right.
And then, a bajillion talks later, we started dating and figuring things out. And now we're at the point where I have another partner. We've been together just over a year now. And my husband's brand new girlfriend, we're all super excited about it. They've been dating since probably April maybe, but they just became official on, I can remember, July 28th. Gotta remember, it's hard with polyamory. You have to remember all these anniversaries and birthdays and all this.
So I'm definitely going to get to that, because definitely going to get into that conversation. Yeah.
Yep. So that's where we're at now.
Okay.
Where the way that our polycule, as we call it, looks.
Okay. And so just a brief kind of overview, and then we'll really get into discussions. But what kind of led you career-wise? So I know you're a non-monogamous coach. What kind of led you from your therapy and social work into, I want to coach people and help them in their journey in this?
Yeah. So, I went into social work school thinking I was not going to be a therapist, which is really funny, and did all kinds of other social work, mostly medical. I worked in hospitals and hospice. And, I think in doing that kind of work, you really see how important family is to people and how different families can look. And, I never connected those dots then, but, I went into a group private practice, ended up opening my own private therapy practice, which I still also own, 2 separate businesses. And I think I figured this out, and I felt very, not to toot my own horn, but I felt fairly well prepared because I was a therapist, because I had this education around how to identify emotions, how to communicate, how to help other people learn to do that. And, being a social worker, I had heard and seen, all kinds of stories. And so things didn't really surprise me, that kind of stuff. But I think for folks who don't have that kind of background, and maybe in their life or their childhood or whatever, they don't, no one's ever really taught them exactly how to identify their emotions and communicate them. I think that's really hard. And there are some great books out there. But beyond that, there's nowhere near the level of resources for polyamorous and non-monogamous folks that there are for monogamous relationships. And so I just saw this like gap of like, okay, well, I know how to help people. I know how to listen without judgment. I know how to help other people do that. So I think I could help that. Like, I think I could figure out how to like walk other people down this line and kind of put everything together in one big picture instead of like having people feel like they're winging it the whole
Right.
time, which is what I did.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a few things that I
Yeah.
want to kind of dive into with that. But I wanted to ask those questions first to have kind of like a
Yeah.
background since this is our first, really discussion. So I'm
Mhm.
going to start off by my view of polygamy and non-monogamy, right? This is probably ridiculous. Laugh at me if you want to, but
Okay.
so I watch a lot of shows. Sister Wives, Brother Husbands, Seeking
Sister
Sister
wives.
Wives, which
Yeah.
I would imagine that Sister Wives is not the show to go off of, right? Like if you yeah. So,
No.
I so this is my kind of because I don't know anyone who in a healthy way lives in a non-monogamous relationship, right? So everybody I know
Yeah.
or have known is kind of my experience with non-monogamy is cheating, having side chicks, whatever, whatever.
Mhm.
And so one reason that I mean, I cannot tell you how excited I am to have you here. But, partially because I love this topic and I love the fact that you mention emotions, right? So a lot of people probably are like myself and say, okay, well, I've only seen this relationship dynamic in an unhealthy way or on TV, which is typically an unhealthy way too. Um, but I have done a lot of kind of, the research to the extent that I can do without knowing people personally. So I'm really excited to have you on here because not only to my listeners, but to me, you can provide this perspective that you can't get from TV. I can't get from reading articles,
Mhm.
without knowing someone personally or having like a sit down conversation with someone who not only lives this lifestyle, but mentally and emotionally understands what encompasses it. A
Yeah.
lot of people think, initially you hear polygamy, you think, oh my God, like they're just, it's just a reason to bring in extra partners, whatever, people say. But because, I have a background in mental health too, and I've gone through different relationship complexities, so to say. You know, uh, I understand just kind of taking myself out of it as a person and putting myself into it as someone with a psychology background, a mental health background. There are complexities to this, and when you live the specific lifestyle as a lifestyle, it's not just okay. Well, I want to have extra boyfriends, I want to have extra girlfriends, whatever. Like there's a conversation that happens when a couple is like, "Hey, I'm still in love with you, but this is what I need."
Mhm.
And that is a healthy way to have these type of relationships, this type of lifestyle. It's not hook up free for all like a lot of people seem to think typically. So welcome. And I'm really excited to have you here. I'm really excited for the perspective that you will bring to this topic. Um So I found you on it was a like a need a guest post. Was it my post or
Yeah.
your post? I don't remember
I
that
think
part.
I don't remember.
I don't
I make
remember.
so many posts on those things.
So one of us made a post about needing a guest or wanting to guest, or something like that. And we just kind of connected. And I was like, oh my God, I love this topic so much.
You
And
were very enthusiastic.
yes, yes.
I
You know,
remember that.
because I want to learn more myself, but I also, it's like a lot of other things. I want to help kind of shatter this stigma. And it
Yeah.
can
Mhm.
have a very bad stigma because it's like most things, what people don't understand, they just automatically shut out. Or,
Yeah.
they don't want to hear about it. They want to just make the assumptions instead of educate themselves on. So I love topics like this, but I'm excited for people to kind of like, oh, okay, maybe, this isn't what exactly I thought it was too. Um,
Yeah.
so we connected over a post, and we had our initial meeting and decided to let's do this. Here we are. And hopefully this is just one of, a few conversations. There's so many things that we could talk about. But I want to start by kind of talking about your journey and how your educational background and your experience as a therapist led to the conversation that led to changing your lifestyle essentially.
Yeah. I mean, so many things you said like are so spot on. So yeah, I mean, I think that I my husband and I did not know anyone who was non-monogamous before we started. So we weren't like going off of any example. We too, like you said, had this like sister wives basically, right? Like that's
Yeah.
the example that everyone brings up. And I think a couple of things, like first, sister wives is an example of polygamy, which is
Mhm.
different from polyamory.
Right.
Polygamy is the idea of multiple marriages, which is illegal in the United States.
Right.
But and not that I feel that multiple marriages, like marriage ceremonies, whatever, is an issue per se. It's that typically polygamy has roots in very like patriarchal culture. So like
Right.
in that show, it's a man with four wives, right? And those women are not allowed to have other relationships.
Right.
So like that, when that's the only example that you have, it's like hard to think about like, well, how am I going to bring this up in a way that he's not going to be like, what are you talking about? So I think really, again, like I'm very lucky that, first of all, my husband and I have always had very good communication. We went to couples therapy several times early on in our relationship, not because anything was wrong, just because we wanted
Yeah, that's the
to
healthy thing to do.
shore up communication. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we had a lot of like tactics to use, and I don't know what I thought he was gonna say. I was pretty sure that he wasn't gonna like blow up at me because that's just not his like style.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fear of like rejection, of being made to feel like something's wrong with you, or like mostly I was afraid of like, what if he thinks that this means that I don't love him, right? Or he's
Right.
not good enough, or those kind of things. And none of that is true.
Yeah.
And I can't make him think any kind of way, right? Like he's going to feel how he feels.
Right. Yeah.
um so I think like having the background as a therapist and having walked people through many times, like, okay, like let's talk about what feelings are coming up for you. And your feelings are always valid and you cannot control them. And they're a spontaneous chemical reaction in your body. There's nothing you can do to change your feelings. All you can do is try to monitor and control your reaction, right? So
I
when
love that
I
so much.
brought this to him, and yeah, and like when I brought this to him and was like, hey, so I've been reading a bunch of stuff and about non-monogamy in general, which is like an umbrella term.
Hmm.
But I feel like I have always, if I look back, I've been what they call like a serial monogamist, where
Hmm.
like I've been in one long-term relationship after another with very little space in between. And when I was younger, like in high school and early college, people would say like, well, you can't possibly have loved that guy if you're like already with this guy, because like, how do you just lose your feet? Like, how do you just move on that quickly,
Hmm.
kind of thing?
Interesting.
And that didn't make sense to me. That, like, why couldn't I have cared about this person, still have feelings for them, and very much care about them, and yet also feel this way about a new person? That didn't seem that weird to me. But this was kind of like continued pattern throughout my life. And
Yeah.
so when I look back now, I kind of realize that I've always had the capacity to love or be in love with more than one person at a time, which is for me what polyamory is. And, you know, there's different forms of non-monogamy. Not everyone forms like deep emotional connections like my husband and I do. It's a choice. You get to pick and choose your flavor, if you will.
Mm.
But in polyamory, you know, that's what it's about, creating meaningful emotional connections with more than one person.
So I want to kind of piggyback off that and make a point that it's not necessarily just sexual connection. Like it's not a I get to have sex with multiple people because our relationship is an open relationship, which is a whole different kind of thing.
Yes.
Um and you know, more so of building connections with people emotionally, mentally, and physically, but the physical
Yeah.
isn't like the first, like the top priority. You know, of course
Right.
you want to be compatible with
Right.
people, right? But that's not
Yeah.
your focus is hooking up
Right.
or having multiple sexual partners. And I just
Right.
kind of wanted to, you know, just kind of piggyback and point that out because we know from, you know, just life that that is what a lot of people think. Um, one thing
Yes.
that, you know, watching the different shows and reading different things, one thing that interests me about, say, Sister Wives versus the other things that I've seen, excuse me, is even in all of the different shows, that's typically kind of the focus they bring is emotional connections and relationships. So it's one thing that I kind of, you know, appreciate about the shows is because, you know, when that is all you have to go off of, it is nice to know that it's not just kind of being portrayed in this different, this like sexual free for all way.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah. And like that is, there are other forms of non-monogamy that are either more focused or solely focused on sex. And my like opinion of that has always been, great, good for you. Like, as long as everyone's like on the same page and that's what you're looking for,
right.
that's fine. And we shouldn't just make assumptions that everyone who's in any kind of non-monogamous relationship, that that's what they're looking for, right? Like, there are people who there are people who are asexual who are polyamorous. Like, they have
Mhm.
deep emotional meaningful connections with more than one person, and sex isn't really part of it.
Right.
Cool.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
sex is not an issue. I don't think we need to like shame people for that, but like, also people have different flavors of non-monogamy. So let's not just like, yeah, I mean, I think people do think that it's like, I don't know, like we're like having orgies every weekend or something. And
Right.
like,
Right.
if that's what you want to do, awesome. I do not have that much energy. Like,
Right.
that's not a thing I want to do. But if you do, then cool for you, as long as everyone's on the same page and safe and adult and all that. But like,
Right. Right.
that's not what it is for everybody.
So also, you know, okay, so kind of if you're comfortable sharing, what
Yeah.
kind of what was that conversation like? And I ask this because I want to kind of point out the emotional complexities of a conversation like this and the
Mhm.
focuses of the conversation. You know, because if you're someone who's listening and you are interested in a non-monogamous lifestyle, you know, as like you would do with coaching, some of the things that I read on your website, and I love that kind of emotion is your focus. But if you are someone who is interested, you're gonna have conversations with people. They're not always gonna go the way you want them to, right? We're
Yep.
human. And like you pointed out, different people have different emotions and they're allowed to, and that's okay. Um,
Mhm.
but I feel like the conversation that you would have had with your partner would probably be a good example, even if it didn't go well in the beginning, because with
Yep.
your background and your life experience, you know how to navigate a conversation that is emotionally involved.
Yeah. Yeah. So pretty much it was me. I mean, this was partially in the pandemic, so we're just like all chilling at home, right, doing nothing. And I had been reading and seeing a bunch of like content on social media and articles and all this stuff like you're describing reading. And one day I just like kind of called him upstairs and I was like, I like need to share something with you. And he could obviously tell that I was like beyond nervous, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, like what's going on? Like it's okay, like whatever it is. And I was like, I really do not know what you're gonna say. And I'm a little afraid. Um, but I want to like show you some stuff. So basically um like showed him a couple of like these little mini video things I had seen and I said, I'm just sitting here watching this, reading this stuff, and I think this might be me. I think that I have always felt like I've made connections very easily.
Mhm.
And really, I have always felt very fulfilled in a relationship, not because I am not independent or can't do things on my own, which is, of course, what I got like all of my teenage years. Like, you just don't know how to be alone. I
Yeah.
just like being in a relationship. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Um, and so I said, I don't know what in the heck this would look like, but like, what is your initial, like, what's your initial reaction to this? And he was kind of like, okay, so you're saying that what? Like you want to date people, you want to have sex with other people? Like what are you saying? And at the time, also kind of coming into play here was me figuring out my sexuality. And so I said to him, I think that I want to explore being with a woman because I've
Mhm.
never really done that.
Mhm.
And he was like, okay, like I can understand why that would be something, like we got married, we were fairly young when we got married.
Mhm.
And okay, I understand that. But like what does that mean? Like what would that look like, etc. And I was like, listen, like I have basically the same amount of information that you have. So we
The
would
internet.
have to like, right, like the internet. So it seems like, he asked if he could like take some time to think about it. And I was like, obviously, like,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes, please.
Um, and then, of course, I did the whole like, I cried and I said, like, are you mad at me? Do you hate me? Do you say all that normal anxiety stuff, right? That
Yeah.
comes out. And he was like, why? Like, I'm not mad at you for being who you
Aw.
are. I just want to try to like get my head around this.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
not saying yes, but I'm not saying no. I'm just saying, give me a second. Let me like read some stuff or whatever, go on Reddit, whatever, which Reddit isn't always the best place. But let me figure this out. So he took a couple days and we actually had a wedding that we were driving to. It was, I think, like a 6-hour drive.
Mhm.
So I brought a notebook and I was like, okay, what if we like try to just like talk through some stuff? Like you tell me what you think you would be okay with, what you don't think you'd be okay with. I'll tell you, like, with the very little I know, like what I would imagine or what I would be hoping for. Like, am I going to go on dates with this person?
Yeah.
Are you ever going to meet them? Like those kind of things. And so we just kind of created this like beginning. I mean, really, it was like a relationship agreement discussion, but like the very beginnings of that, where I think we wrote like, our intention is to, and then a bunch of things. So like our intention is to like explore our individual selves. Our intention is to have different sexual experiences, whatever. And then we did it is not our intention to. So it is
Yeah.
not our intention to replace each other. It is
Okay.
not our intention to um, you know, have any of this get in the way of our relationship, like all those kind of
Yeah.
things. And just kind of like took it from there initially to figure out like, okay, let's make sure we're on the same page. Like, I'm not saying that I want to replace you. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong or missing with our relationship. That's not at all what's going on.
Right.
This is just like a value added kind of thing. And so we kind of just like went through that, wrote down a whole bunch of stuff. It was awkward at times. It's hard to talk about things that we're basically told not to talk about or want, right? Like we're
Right.
taught that
Right.
you get married and that's your one and only, and you shouldn't have these other thoughts.
Right. So in that regard too, that's something that, is interesting to me because I know multiple couples who have gotten married very young. I got married in my early 20s. Our relationship didn't really work out, not because of that, but thinking back on my first marriage in comparison to my current marriage, I don't know that my first marriage would have lasted regardless because I got married in my early 20s. I already had two kids, and we had kids together. So obviously I'd had other relationships before, but I feel like if I hadn't gone through certain things before my current marriage, say had I married my second husband first, we probably wouldn't have lasted because I hadn't explored so much of life, and
Yep.
I did certain things so early. Myself specifically, I had kids very young. I've, been a parent. I've had to do this and this and this. Now my life is pretty different. My kids are older, and I'm glad that we didn't get married until our mid 30s, late 30s, because I don't know. I don't know that it would have lasted had we got married in our 20s, kids or not. Um, you know, and there's multiple couples that I know who have got married young, they had a kid or had kids, and their marriage was in shambles by their mid 20s, early 30s. And it's part of because, naturally, right? Typically, men are going to have a little bit more experience in certain areas than women. Sexually, typically, if we're just being honest, typically men are going to have more partners than women, especially before they settle down and get married, right? And for the couples that I know specifically who haven't worked out, the men, they've had other partners, the women have not. The women go into the marriage and they have the kids and they do the things and their, life kind of becomes unsatisfied as where the men have kind of already experienced these things and they may or may not have, because in both two relationships specifically, I know the men have also stepped outside of the marriage. The women haven't that I know of, but there's a lot of components, you know what I mean? And then I know one, they got divorced, they married very young, had a kid, got divorced, and now she is kind of explorer partners, and not in a like I'm hopping around, sleeping around kind of way, but just like this was so much of my life that I didn't experience anything else. I just know this one person. And I think that traditionally getting married as a virgin, as a very young, a teenager, a young adult, not having any other life experience. And I'm not saying that you should go have sex with other people before you get married. That's not what I'm saying at all, but I feel like typically when people are confined, they kind of break out of this shell later in life. You know what I mean? Like, and you either
Yeah.
go extreme or things get kind of messy. So I think for people to have this kind of conversation, hey, we started this very young. Also, we aren't the same people that we were when we got married in our early 20s. You know, you're not at all the same person in your 20s that you are in your 30s. Not at all. Because I'm very different and I wouldn't want to go back to being that person in my 20s. Like, you know. Um, so what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's so much, like, this is not at all to like hate on monogamy or suggest that like it doesn't work or whatever. I have friends who are extremely happy,
Mm,
married, monogamous, and will always be monogamous. That's not the issue. I think
right,
the issue comes in ideally in a marriage, right? Like in a perfect world, which isn't real. Um,
right.
you marry someone understanding that they will be different versions of themselves throughout their
100%.
life,
100%.
and you're marrying all of those people, and that's probably the most beautiful thing my husband has ever said to me. When we started this whole thing, it was like, look, when I stood up there with you and I promised to love you and to support you and all of that, I married the Jess that you were then at 25. And I knew that I was marrying every conceivable possible version of you going forward, because I was making that lifetime commitment,
Yeah,
and that's what I was going to do. And so this is just a different version of you. This is you growing and learning and changing and figuring yourself out. And like, what's wrong with that? As long as we stay honest and open with each other, this is not cheating. This is not, no one's lying. In fact, I think we were very honest from the beginning, but we're even more honest now than before because it's necessitated.
right,
Um,
right, yeah,
and yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, I think this whole like till death do us part thing, there's nothing wrong with that. And marriage as an institution started back when people lived to be like, I'd probably already be dead. Like, till death do us part until you're like 35, right? And like, that doesn't mean that there aren't monogamous couples that truly are deeply in love their whole lives. They make it work, they do the work required. That's absolutely true. I think those people are amazing and rare.
right,
It's
right,
just true,
right,
right? Like,
right,
and I think you can take it one of two ways, right? Like, you can decide we have become different people and this relationship doesn't work for us anymore. And so we're going to end it amicably. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm
right,
certainly not implying that, like, if that's a point where someone's at, that they should like just consider non-monogamy. Like,
right,
no.
right, right.
And if there's a part of you that's like, I think I could get fulfillment from this,
Mhm.
then what's wrong with that?
Right,
Like, we get a lot of hate. I mean, not us. I mean, I've gotten hate personally, but like, that's because I'm very out there, right, on the internet and with my coaching and stuff. And people say all kinds of things. Um, but they don't know me. They don't know my
right,
husband. They don't know my partner. They have no idea. Like, this is my version for me in the way I practice non-monogamy.
mm,
This is my version of creating a family. These two men are my lifelong partners. We don't live together right now, but we have discussed and continue to discuss living closer together or together.
mhm,
We're lightly planning on taking a vacation to Greece next year with all four of
ooh,
us, including my
okay,
husband's other partner. Um, and that's like, to me, it's just, there's the family you're born with, and then there's the family you choose. And these are people I choose to be part of my
right,
family, just like my best friend, just like, that's just, and I think as long as we're all being honest, nothing, there's no
Yeah.
harm. Other people will look at you funny.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
When I walked into the Barbie movie holding both of my partner's hands, people looked at me funny. But
They were probably just upset because they couldn't do that in their own relationship. Sometimes I'm just
yeah,
saying,
sometimes people I think are like this one
Mhm.
I go to a chiropractor, and the young woman who like does the front desk every time we mention something, like she'll say, oh, what are you doing this weekend? And I was like, oh, I'm actually going to Ohio to a family reunion with my other partner. And she was like, I just admire you so much for that. Like,
Yeah.
she's just like, wow, like, isn't that something that like you
Yeah.
can really do this in like an honest, emotionally mature way? And I'm
Yeah.
like, thanks. I mean, I'm not trying to be this like, you know,
Yeah.
magical being. I'm just doing me. But yeah, I
It
mean,
just comes naturally. No.
yeah. I mean, like it's not easy all of the time,
Right.
but
Right.
no
Right.
relationships are easy. It all takes work.
Right. And I wanted to shit, I lost my train of thought. I, I had something. Uh,
It's okay. Happen.
one of the things is I'm not even going to bring kind of religion into the topic because that's a whole nother thing. But one of the things that create stigma is religion, right? Um, but I know people who have religion in their lives and they have had affairs. Um, you know, and I think it's one thing that continues the part of the stigma around non-monogamy is there's a religious component, but there's also kind of a social status component to this, because there's certain things you have these affairs, you have these relationships out, but like other people can't know because I have this image to uphold, right?
Yeah.
It's literally nothing different than you already do in your life. You're just not being sneaky and most of the time unsafe about it. Because when you are stepping out in your relationship and
Mhm.
it's not an agreed upon thing, you're typically not doing it in a safe way, right? Like if we're being honest, it's either however you're
Yeah.
going about it, you're being deceitful and that's unsafe in your relationship because it's unhealthy. Having sex with other people and not protecting your partner is that's
Yep.
and so it's kind of like why don't we just be honest about what we're doing
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
have it be
100%.
healthy than just having it be unsafe and unhealthy. You know what I mean? Like and like
Yeah.
you said, it's not for
Yeah.
everyone.
And I find
But
yeah, no. And like, it's not for everybody. Trust me. Like, I also think I saw this bit by a comedian recently online. Um, this comedian is Jewish, and she was talking about, she said, I've been practicing polyamory, and my mother said, it's against the Torah. And she said, have you read the Torah? Because whole bunch of men had, there's one, I forget which one, but someone had 700 wives. Now, do I really think this man had
first of
700
all,
wives? No. But there are so many places in the Bible where, I mean, with Abraham and Sarah,
hmm
Sarah could not have a child. So
yes,
Sarah told Abraham to have a child with their servant.
yeah,
At the same time, Sarah happened to get pregnant. So he had a consensually based relationship with this other woman, right? And
yeah,
like, yeah, we can do the whole, but it was only to have a child. And it was only because, yes, but there are plenty of examples, biblical examples of
100%. Yeah,
people having many wives.
yeah,
Most of the time, it was men having
yeah.
multiple wives, right? So
Yep.
I would argue that's even a worse example because that's all patriarchal, right? Those women don't have choice, right?
100%. And
I'm the
it,
one
yeah,
that brought this up in my relationship,
yeah.
you know? But
And
I mean, I get it.
yeah,
People don't know what they don't know, and they're
100%.
afraid.
That's one of the kind of like I love that saying. Uh people are afraid of what they don't understand.
Mhm.
I feel like I could throw that out into so many situations.
Yep.
I'm a big advocate within the LGBTQ plus community,
Yep.
and one of the things that drives me crazy about people, it is you don't know anybody living this lifestyle.
Nope.
You have so many assumptions to make because you don't understand, like, you're afraid of what you don't understand. How
Yep.
about having conversations with people? How
Yes.
about getting to know people? How about actually knowing people in the community, right? And
Ask someone whose life you're
yeah,
talking about. Yeah, and I mean,
yeah,
I think to me, it's very simple. People are afraid of what they don't know and what they don't
mhm,
understand. So you have two choices.
yeah,
One, you can choose not to learn these things and remain ignorant.
right,
That's fine
yes,
if that's your
yes,
choice.
yep.
Just keep your mouth shut because that's your choice. You are allowed to make that choice. If you do not want to learn or understand or listen to views that are opposing to whatever, that's okay. But guess what? Those people also don't want to hear it from you if you
Right,
are choosing to not do that work.
right,
So
right.
you're absolutely allowed to choose that. Or you can go and take the second choice and learn something and see what happens. You can still
Educate.
come out of it with the same opinion, but let's take all of the things and put them in the blender, blend it together, and then see what comes out
Right.
instead of just operating off of, what we've always known. Well, that's the way we've always done. I firmly believe that sentence, that's the way we've always done it, is the most dangerous sentence in history,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Just
Yep.
because we've always done it doesn't mean it's a good idea.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
even referring to, say, biblically, I think people kind of forget geography a little bit. People forget technology a
Mhm.
little bit. People couldn't communicate with other people unlike them or outside of their little circle.
No.
So, like, people only knew the little group of people they knew, which is completely different from now. We have access to information that
Mhm.
people didn't have access to hundreds of years ago. You can learn about other lifestyles. Things don't just have to be this little bubble. And really at this point, it's kind of inexcusable to live in a little bubble because you have so many opportunities to not. And I mean just outside of reading stuff on the internet, right? Like, watch people's
Mhm.
YouTube channels, actually go out in your community, volunteer places, get to know people and not on a level of hatred. Volunteer and get it connected with your community on a level of understanding people and kind of crushing that fear that you have. And like you said, if you still have the same opinion, well, this is what my religion, says, this is how I choose to practice. Cool. But I just feel like if you had a little more understanding of other people and other lifestyles, you could still have your same beliefs, but you wouldn't use them to hurt people.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think that's one of the arguments, right? Is people will say, well, I'm entitled to my opinion. Absolutely, you are.
Yeah.
And you are not entitled to use your opinion against other people.
Yeah.
That's not a right. We don't like
Right.
you're allowed free speech, all of those things, but you don't get to say, well, but I have a gay friend, but I still like you don't get to I don't care. If you go out there and you do the work and you still have the opinion you have, that's fine. I applaud you for doing the work. And that doesn't mean that you get to throw that against me in my life, right? Because
Right.
I'm not going to do that to you.
Right. Well, I'm not going to go into specifics, but there is a relationship that I know of. This person is very vocal in their beliefs, about anything but the standard straight relationship,
Yeah.
on any level. And we've had this conversation very openly, and their view is, well, my view is not going to change, whatever, that's cool. And I don't treat people badly because of it. However, if I know somebody who lives this way, I make sure to tell them so and so and so. And at the same time lives in a very, very unhealthy relationship. And I just kind of point that out to say it's judging other people is not fair at all. You know, it's difficult for me to get on board with someone who can say, I hate this, but I tolerate this. It's like it's like picking and choosing what you want to believe and follow, and it's just difficult for me to like get on board with that. Like I feel like other people's relationships, unless they're coming to you as a coach or even as a friend, really not ours to judge anyway. Because most of the time, we're not all perfect. We all have flaws within our relationships with ourselves as humans. It's really not, unless, okay, we're watching a TV show, we're going to judge that, right? But it's like in reality, a real person, nobody's relationship really is ours to judge unless they're asking us to. So,
Mhm.
you know, um, and gosh, I forgot. I hate when I'm like, I got this really like good point going. Um, so I wanted to kind of briefly touch on too. I don't know how much time we have left, but about what time you have to wrap up.
Um, I mean, soon-ish, but I have a couple more minutes.
Okay. So I just want to touch on this really quick.
Yeah.
So my husband and I have had a conversation about, like I I have kids, I've been raising kids for 23 years. I don't want to raise no more kids. I don't want to do the newborn baby stage again. I don't even want to do look, I've done it. I've got projects I want to work on. I've got businesses to run. I don't want no more babies. So I can't have kids anymore anyway. So we've had a legit sit down conversation about it. Started off as a joking sister wives conversation, right? But it's turned into, even as of recently, like, okay, well, let's think about this logically. What would this be like? And I've even thrown out questions about, okay, well, if you just had a co-parent, because he's like, well, I'm happy with this relationship. I don't necessarily want two partners. Um, what about just a co-parent relationship? And I said, well, okay, think about this though. If we're being realistic, let's be realistic. So to have, if you want to have this kid naturally, do you think that at your stage in life, being who you are, that you would be able to procreate with this woman, raise a child with her, and be as involved as you should be, right? Because I don't want you over here just having a kid you see on the weekends. Like you create a kid intentionally just to see him on the weekends? Absolutely not. Think about emotionally, mentally, physically, would that be sustainable for you? And he's like, okay, well, I haven't really actually thought about this aspect of this, but it's something, you need to think about if this is something you want, if you want a biological child, I can't give you a biological child unless we, go a medical route, which costs a lot of money. So if you want a biological child, I'm not gonna keep that from you. I have biological children. And so I don't know what it's like to want children and not be able, or, not have them. I would never take that from you.
Mhm.
So if that is something that you want, let's figure out how we can do this. And if it's not biologically with me, okay, then what route are we going to pursue? Um, you know, I feel like these conversations don't necessarily happen as often as they could. And because of now, I know if we actually did that, especially if he had a second partner to raise that child with the way that he should, you know, people are going to judge me for that. I don't give a shit. Like, I had a kid at 14. You think I care if somebody's judging me about something like that? No. Whatever. But because of, stigma, a lot of people, and you can have kind of a a mutual understanding of a co-parenting relationship outside of your relationship, whatever, whatever. But let's be honest, how well does that really work, right? That person might go on, start another relationship, and he's like, well, I wouldn't want my kid being around some other man. It's complex. If you want to have a child, your partner can't have a child, but you want to raise that child in a relationship, you know, there are options in that too. And, I'm bisexual. I don't currently have a female partner. I'm good in this relationship over here. Got a lot of kids. I don't have time for it right now, you know, but I think that it should be a conversation that I should be able to have with my partner too. You know what I mean? Where we plan to be together for
Yeah.
the rest of our lives. And, like you said, people change, situations change. And I think that sometimes in order to maintain a healthy relationship, a successful relationship, we should be able to have conversations with our partner that are, you know, expressing to each other what we actually need. What can we actually do? Sorry, my computer's battery's low. What can we actually do to maintain this relationship and not have
Yeah.
it die because we can
Yeah.
no longer fulfill each other's needs?
Mhm. Yeah. And that's what it's all about, is like, this is about fulfilling each other, if you're having people's needs fulfilled. And like, people are at different places in terms of like how willing they are to do that, how much they feel they have to give, etc. And that's okay. And that's really important. Like, we should be honest about those things,
Yeah,
right? But like, my husband and I have had the same conversation that you just described. I personally don't have a desire to carry a child. So I've said we can adopt. And he has brought up, and at this point it's been mostly like conjecture, but he has said, what if another one of my partners were to want to have a child? What would you think about that? And basically I said, that would be another conversation that we'd have to have about like
that's fair. Yeah.
who's involved, right, in the
Yeah.
child's life, and how would they be parented, like what would my role be or wouldn't
Mhm.
be. And but if everyone was on the same page, then I would not count that out as a possibility.
Yeah.
I don't really think there's much that I would count out as a possibility. The only things that are out of the realm are things that like people aren't actually okay with, right? And like, that's the piece, is we have to be honest, right? You have to tell people what it is you really want and need. They cannot guess. People cannot actually read minds. Like, they do not, if you do not tell them, they do not know.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
it doesn't matter how well you think people, I mean, I get that all the time, where people will say, my partner, this, that, and the other, but they did this thing or whatever. And I'll say, okay, well, when you told them that bothered you, what did they say? And sometimes people will say, well, I didn't tell them. They just know. No, they don't.
Well,
I
that's never the
promise you,
case.
they don't.
Should never make that assumption.
Yeah, no, no, no. And listen, have there been times where I've started to talk to my husband and said like, hey, so when you did this thing, and he'll say, I know, I'm sorry. You've told me this before. You felt this kind of way, right? And like repeats it back to me. But it's not his responsibility to figure out how I'm feeling. It's my responsibility to tell him how I'm feeling. And then he needs to, we need to work together to figure out what to do. But yeah, people, if you do not tell them, they do not know. Let's just assume that across the board. If the
100%.
words don't come out of your mouth, it didn't happen.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I think there are so many possibilities for relationships, for families, for kids, for all of this, if we just can get to a place where we can be honest about it. And is that easy to do? No. Is that a natural inclination for humans? No. Like, it takes
Yeah.
work. And I think if you want to do that work, it's available to you, and you should do it and see where it leads you.
Yeah. Very well said. Well, let us know where we can find you.
Yeah. So you can find me on the social medias, of course. So I have a Facebook group called Non-Monogamous Newbies. It's just hit 300 members, which is super exciting.
Oh,
Yeah, yay.
nice.
Group of, like-minded folks who are trying to figure out this stuff and what they want in relationships and what that can look like. I'm under the same Instagram handle, non-monogamous _ newbies. And then you can also check out my website, which is bothandcoaching.com, BOTHAND coaching.com. And you can see more about me on there, more about my programs. I do free 40-minute consult calls for people. Just want to see if like it would make sense to work together. But yeah, I'm here. There's a lot of free info and education in my Facebook group. I'm all about just sharing the things I know, also my mistakes, so that you hopefully don't repeat them. I think it makes a difference to have guidance, because I had basically none, and it worked out okay and we're good, but we were winging it the whole time. So if you can not wing it, that is a good idea.
Right. And then two more things. If you could give someone who is interested in living this lifestyle in a healthy way one piece of advice, what would it be?
Do not rush. Take your time, read the things, listen to the podcast, have the conversations. Don't start it's very easy when we get excited about something new to just jump in.
Yeah.
This is not a thing you want to learn by doing, ideally, right? And you're going to, that's going to happen. But like, this is not like an all on the job kind of thing, right? Like, we want to have some basis of knowledge and understanding before we go into this, especially around like relationship agreements and like, how do we set up the container of like what we feel is okay and feels good for us. So yeah, don't rush. It's definitely my number one.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for being here today, and we hope to have you back soon. Um,
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. I'd love to.
All right.
You're
Bye.
welcome. Have a good day.
You too. If anyone wants to chime in, or if anybody has questions they want us to answer or topics to discuss, you can leave that on the Facebook page. Visit www.philolity.net. That's FALOLITY.